Okay, dear friends, everybody, I think it's time to. She also created a number of exhibits, so I really advise you to look online about her profile, but also on our website. We have at least one working paper from you. Dilda was a recipient of one of our scholarship, and we are super glad to continue our work with her. And she's going to present a current research. So that's the idea of this seminar series in IFÉAC, is always to present also something like new and be open to Q&A. So the presentation will be 30-40 minutes, and then we'll have time for questions and debate with the speaker, and that's also something we really cherish here in IFÉAC, this moment of exchange. So feel free to sort of think about your questions, keep them for the end, and then we will start the debate. So now I give the floor to you, Dilda, and I'm really excited to hear about your research.
Thank you very much, dear Marie. I'll be speaking to you seated. I think it will be more comfortable for everyone. So, hi, thank you very much for coming, for having time. What I'll be presenting today is what precisely Marie said is part of my current research. I just finished my second year of PhD. So what I'm sharing is just the knowledge in construction. So it's not like the ready results I'm ready to unpack, but something I managed to gather, something I managed to notice, something that I wanted to try. So for that reason, I ask you really to be critical and to be, if you have any feedback, any comment, any question, please feel free to ask me, because I believe this is the constructive way of kind of change and test our hypothesis. So my talk today will be about contemporary art in Central Asia. And to talk about it, I decided to put this amazing artwork of Almagun Ningibayeva, who's a Kazakhstani contemporary artist. At this very moment in Almaty, we have a new contemporary art institution that opened just like a couple of weeks ago, Almaty Museum of Arts. And right now at this museum, you have a retrospective of Almagun. So she's one of the most prominent contemporary artists of Central Asia. And her work is precisely about, I would say, female protagonists. And there's a lot of spatiality in the work. This is one of the pictures that shapes the so-called center of Eurasian continent. And of course, there are some questions about where the center of Eurasian continent is located precisely. What is Eurasia? The debate, the concept itself of Eurasia is quite debatable. We all know it. But still, there is believed to be several centers of Eurasia that are marked by some monuments, and one of them is located, according to what people think, in Semipalatinsk, near Semipalatinsk, the city which is close to where Almagun herself is from. So one of her works is like about this imagining of the center, the heart of Eurasian continent, with placing a woman on top of it, right? So there'll be a lot of that kind of mapping, imagining geography, and maybe appropriating this kind of geography in the talk I'm going to present you today. So yeah, that's why I thought it would be interesting to start with this. Let us proceed with the next slide. Ça marche pas. Arrêtez le partage. Je sais pas si ça va aider. Vas-y. Okay.
Ok, ça marche sur le Zoom, mais ça marche pas souvent en salle.
Voulez-vous qu'on la ferme et qu'on essaye de la revenir?
You should restart today.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I will try to do it. Désolée. Yeah, sorry for this.
Si vous avez un deuxième bureau, vous pouvez faire glisser la fenêtre sur celui-là.
Ah, yeah, great. So yeah, contemporary art in Central Asia is actually something that I study as a doctoral researcher at the moment. But to be very fair, my way into academia was through the art world. So I started working as a curator 10 years ago. So progressively, I grew an interest, an academic interest into this field. But a lot of my knowledge and a lot of my understanding of how this whole system works comes from this professional experience. And for a lot of time, I wanted to separate this kind of, I wanted to say like a critical, unbiased researcher addressing the issue. And then I had like my own professional experience separated. But this time I want to present something like different and to see how, what can offer the overlapping of these two things. So if we can go to another slide. Next slide. Yes. So it all actually started in France for me. So I started working. I actually discovered contemporary art of Kazakhstan when I was a student in France. I was a bachelor student. I was doing my licence in Strasbourg in art history. And I was looking for, how do you call it, internship, a stage that I needed to do. And I was sending my resumes everywhere. And I remember at some point I got a response from Musée d'Art Moderne et Contemporain de Strasbourg, so Strasbourg Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art, which said like, wow, you're from Kazakhstan, we need you to help us. So because we're bringing this exhibition of Kazakhstani contemporary artists, the exhibition was called La vie est une légende, the life is a legend. And it was held from December 2014 till something like March 2015. So more than 11 years ago it started actually. And of course I was very excited because this project being held in France opened to me like a panorama and the whole scene of artistic practices that I couldn't see in Kazakhstan. This was paradoxical, but it was also very lucky for me that I was there at that time. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is how the exhibition looked, more or less. It was, as you can see, a group show of different artists working with different media. So there was like installation, photography, video room, a very classical white box, white cube exhibit. But what is interesting is that the artists themselves, some of them came to Strasbourg, and I got the chance to meet them, to be introduced to them, to learn about contemporary art in general, and precisely the reality of contemporary art in Kazakhstan, which is completely different. Also, one artist came, a photographer and videographer, Alexander Ubel. He came and he actually made a residency with a master student of this Strasbourg University in which I was studying. So it opened me to like a lot new ways, a lot new people to get to know this scene and the art world of Central Asia in general through this exhibit. So that's how I started getting my curatorial experience. So after this experience, I moved back to Kazakhstan. I worked with different museums, contemporary art galleries, started curating on my own. And this is how nowadays I arrived to this approach. I think I can move to this, where I actually try to overlap. So what I'll be presenting today is at the same time something that I got from my scientific research, the data that I got from there, the observation, the knowledge, but also the knowledge that I got from working in the field as art practitioner, as a curator. So yeah, let's try. This is the first time I'm trying this, so yeah, let's see what's going to happen. Can we move to the next one? So yeah, this is the plan for today's presentation. I'm going to introduce briefly contemporary arts in Central Asia, because I believe every research should start with the definition. I will then introduce the framework of my own research and how I approach it. Then I will speak precisely about the relevance of the spatial approach, why I think spatiality is a key concept when addressing contemporary art. And then I'll show you one case study, briefly. Well, I'll see how much time we'll have. And then, of course, we'll discuss this. Yes, thank you. So when I talk to people who are not working on the arts, they always ask me, like, what is contemporary art? And it's actually very hard to give one very concise definition because there are many elements. And here, especially because I work in the Western context, mostly I do my PhD in France. I have a lot of exhibitions that have been curated in there. So I got to explain the specificity of Central Asian contemporary art. So I made this comparative table to show you what are the crucial difference between the art that emerged, contemporary art emerged in the Western context, and then contemporary art as emerged in Central Asian context. So speaking about the chronology, art historians believe that globally, contemporary art started like in the post-war period, in the second half of the 20th century. Whereas for Central Asia, we consider late Soviet period, so it's perestroika, or even early post-Soviet years. So all these specialists agree on the 80s and 90s being like the date when this kind of artistic practices emerged in the region. Then globally, in the Western context, contemporary art emerged right away as a critique of capitalism, of this system. Think about, Andy Warhol and his silk screens and the prints he does and the reproduction of all the brands and the criticism of consumption. And then, whereas in Central Asia, contemporary art emerges as a criticism of socialism, of course, because at the time when this type of art appears in the region, the system that dominates the aesthetic system is that of the socialist realism, right? So it's socialism. So we only had that type of art that was considered like the only that should be presented. And socialist realism means that there were like every realm was separated. There was a union of artists, union of sculptors, union of writers, union of journalists. Everyone got their own like filière, like a union. And then there was like a dictate, and the commissions came mostly from the state. And the commissions, they were ideologically charged. So it was basically socialist realism was the instrument of socialist propaganda. We all know that. So globally, when this type of art emerges, it has a great institutional material and legitimacy. It is presented in the exhibitions, in the art fairs. It has high visibility. There are collectors that appear that start to buy this type of art. Whereas in Central Asia, when this type of art appears, it appears first as a counterculture with very low legitimacy, with very low visibility. And this visibility only appears now. And it's the visibility that this type of art has is very different depending on the country. For example, the visibility of these practices in Kyrgyzstan is different from that what we have, for example, in Kazakhstan. Whereas this year we saw 2 major contemporary art centers opening, right? So that means new type of legitimacy for this kind of culture. And speaking of the market in Central Asia, it's very difficult to address the issue of the market because it exists, but we don't have clear data on what is purchased, who purchases, what are the amounts. There is no specific taxation specifically for the arts, I mean. So it's like very hard to tell the exact state of the market, although there were some tentatives and there was some research. And of course, globally, contemporary art right away has its official educational center. So you can go to university, you can go to academy, you can learn this type of art. Whereas in Central Asia, still contemporary art is not very much acknowledged officially by the education system. For example, I know that here in the Art Academy, they don't learn contemporary art. Same goes for Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan. However, there are grassroots projects, educational projects. Here in Bishkek, you have Bishkek School of Contemporary Art. That, of course, educational program, and they own the teaching. Before them, and kind of people who shaped them, I believe, were Gulnara Kasmaliyev and Eur'Orbem Jumaliyev, local artists who also kind of had their own art school, which is called Artist. In Kazakhstan, we had some grassroots educational projects, but it's always like something non-governmental, not supported by the state. So yeah, there are many elements that are lacking. Can we move to the next one? But in general, if I had to sum up it, I would say that it's not a movement, but rather in terms of art history, right? But rather a complex and complete system, which comprises the following elements. There is production of art, there is presentation of art, there is reception of art by the spectators, by the press, by the critics, and there is circulation of art. So there is still market, and there is still circulation of objects from our countries to some other institutions, because a lot of Western institutions, they have items of contemporary Central Asian art in their collections. In terms of artistic media, if we speak, if we have to delimit it somehow, I would say that there is no actually delimitation. So it can be all encompassing. It comprises painting, installation, video, sculpture, performance, sound, also text-based forms. So it's very, very broad. Next. Yeah, another key element that I want to show you that questioning the societal issues must be one of the key elements for this type of art to be contemporary, because not all art that is produced today is contemporary art, obviously, right? Here is an example of a 2014 painting of Nursultan Nazarbayev, the first president of the Republic of Kazakhstan. And as you can see, well, it was done recently, but it's not contemporary art, obviously, because there is no, it's like very socialist realism in the form, in its message, right? So we have to be very careful because chronologically it is contemporary, but it's not contemporary by its nature. Okay? Let's move to the next one. Yeah, so if we go back to my research, and this is actually very relevant for my curatorial practice, I consider these three countries, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan, so former Soviet Central Asian republics. And these are also the countries in which I worked myself as a curator, in which I exhibited things. And for the time frame, I consider this period of 34 years, so 1991, I think it's clear as the date is the beginning of our independences. It's the fall of the Soviet Union. It's a new chapter, right, in the history, a shift to a new capitalist system to many different ways. And there are many things to unpack. 2025 for now is the date that I keep, because there is, I would say there is less of a strong marker. What I want to say is that for now, 2025 is the year where we can see some important art institutions emerge in the region. So Central Asian art have been presented globally, but now I see that the movement is within Central Asia itself. There appear institutions. For example, you know that Tashkent is about to open Tashkent Center for Contemporary Art. It just opened Bukhara Biennial. If you want to go there to see what kind of art they present, you're very welcome. The same goes for Almaty. We have two major contemporary art institutions opened right now. For Bishkek, it's kind of different. Although there are museums, there are private museums showing contemporary art in here. So I would say that 2025 marks a new type of visibility for this type of cultural production. Yeah, now let's move to the spatial approach. Why I think spatial approach is important and would be relevant for addressing contemporary art practices, both from the point of view of the research and from the point of view of working as a professional of this field, right? So I think geography is very much at the heart of what we're doing, because when you're in academia, you still have this notion of area studies, right? So what we're doing now, we're doing Central Asian studies, which means that we are studying a geographically limited territory. And this question of geography, it appears from the very beginning, right? It doesn't really matter how you name it, because there are different denominations. Here I put Central Asian because this is what I prefer. But where I do my doctorate, it's also called Eastern Europe. It can be called Eurasian. It can be called many other ways. But the idea is that we work on geographically delimited space, right? Which is also something we can criticize, but it's still, it's present. Then, of course, when I say that I work in Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan, I actually mean that I address Bishkek, Tashkent, and Almaty, because one cannot work on the whole country, right? And also, it is important for me to work on these three precise cities, because for me they played like a very important role in the history of that type of art, in the formation of this art, as cultural centers, as art hubs of their time. Even though like in the beginning it was clear because these three cities, they were capitals. Now you know that Almaty is no longer capital, but it still keeps its central position within the cultural production, right? So it's important to address the three. And also for me, it's important to address the city scale and not the country scale, because this is a way of countering the nationalist agenda. When you consider like a nation state, a nationalist project really emerged on the surface. And I don't want to work on that nationalist project. I want to see how this nationalist project can be tested and countered, actually, if we consider the scale of the city. Yeah, let's move to another one. And then we have curating, right? Curating, which I consider also a knowledge production practice, because for me, curating is mostly about producing exhibitions. It can be many different things, but what I did in my own practice is I mostly conceptualized and then mounted exhibitions, which means arranged spatially different objects, different artworks in one room, in many rooms, in one delimited space. So it's a very, as an activity, it's a temporal one, and it's also spatial one. And exhibitions as such are both temporal and spatial phenomena, even if you don't exhibit spatial things. Like if we think of video, for example, video projections, if you only do video exhibition, people would say there is no materiality in video. It's like a silk in projection. But still, to exhibit video, you have to arrange a certain space. You have to arrange a circulation in that type of space. So you're very much dealing with space, with the physicality of space. And of course, when we think of exhibitions as specific time spaces, the notion of heterotopia comes to mind, of course. You know it, right? So it's like a coined by Foucault in 1967, determining like a specific other spaces, right? Other spaces that function to their own intrinsic law. And I believe that a successful exhibition gives you this idea of another space, another experience of time and space within the display. Yeah. Oh, окей. Там была вторая картинка.
На вторую,
Нет, я имею в виду, рядом была картинка, она пропала, да, кажется. It's okay. Okay. А если мы на следующий слайд пойдем? Нет, все. Okay, nice. Okay. This is very sad because there was like two images and one disappeared. And it was a good one, but okay. Yeah, c'est pas grave. So I wanted to show you in the term of creating a space, a different space within the exhibition space, this project, which for me is like still amazes me, although it was done in 1991 by one person who is considered to be the protagonist, pioneer of contemporary art, one of the founding figures of contemporary art, Rustam Khalfin. So he was born in Tashkent, but lived most of his life in Almaty. And in 1991, he got a grant from Soros Center of Contemporary Art, thanks to which he could mount this amazing project. And here there was actually a plan of the building. So he rented like like a huge underground in Almaty with many rooms. And when you could look from the up, you could see that there is actually, throughout the plan, it was so funny because it was so crucial. Maybe I could show it. Oh, no, it will take a lot of time. After I'll show you. I'll find it to you. So there was a plan, and the plan gave that in each room, there was a particular part of a human body. As you can see here, it's a leg. So the metal structure here is like, but there was a whole human body spread through the whole underground. And it was 18-meter long human figure that visitors of the exhibition entered. And so it's a lot of reflection on the space, on how we perceive space, on tactility, because Rustam Khalfin was developing his own theory of art, very much in relation to nomadism, but we're not going to talk about it now. But yeah, it was amazing how he could transform the space. And the space was also habitable, meaning that you could install things within, you could actually go inside and lay on the hay. There were some performances taking place. So it was like a space in a space, very interesting approach. Let's move to the next one. And it's funny because Rustam Khalifin is also one of the architects of the modernist Almaty. So this building that you can see here, for those of you who recognize and know Almaty and have been to the city, this is one of the twin buildings on the central square. And actually, Rustam Khalifin was one of the architects of the city. So for me, it's interesting. His example is that of someone who makes the city appear. So he shapes the city space, and at the same time, he makes like a very alternative space in the undergrounds of the city. So it's kind of having these two aspects that are very important for my research. And I know that here in Bishkek, the architects are also very important for the scene, because also one of the founding figures of this scene are also architects, and they have a lot of architectural experience. So this architectural approach to the space is also crucial in how we, understand it. Let's move to the next one. So now let's talk about theory a bit, and what are the theoretical, let's say, concepts that I use in my research. So I consider cities, mostly Almaty, Bishkek, and Tashkent. But of course, there are some other cities that appear because contemporary art cannot be found only in these three centers. There are some other cities that emerge. So I consider these cities as spaces that are produced by contemporary artists, by the agency of these artists. So artists are considered by me in this sense outside of purely artistic circuits, right? So outside of only art world, but I consider them more largely as social and urban actors. And to do so, I rely on the theory of Henri Lefebvre, which you of course know, production of space. So Lefebvre, he was philosopher, sociologist. He considered space as non-neutral, as not a vacuum that like a passive container of some ideology, but actually intrinsically social, that can be shaped by social interactions, by human interactions, by power structures, by economic forces. So I very much rely on this idea of actors producing artists as actors producing cities. And can we go to the next one? Yeah, this is just to show you the three-part system of Lefebvre, because he distinguished three types of space. Espace perçu, so space, perceived space. Espace conçu, conceived space. Espace vécu, lived space. So basically, what we have, and it was very interesting and revolutionary for his time, approach to space, which is not only the space as imagined by urban developers and urbanists, not also the space as practice, but also space in which people live, right? Space of everyday interactions, which becomes the life space, right? Can we move to the next one? For example, yesterday when crossing the Kordal, the border between Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, I noticed this new object because I came here thanks to the AMI Bourse grant. I came here in 2006. No, oh my God, what I'm saying. I came here in June this year, and I didn't see this things. So these are very new, and it's super interesting to see how actually the space is being constructed. Of course, in Central Asia, the most active and visible actor that produces space is the state power. We all know that. But it's interesting to see the symbols that they place. Right here, we have this idea, very cliche, very orientalistic idea of a caravan as a crossing point. Okay, they have some flowers, and it's interesting. But I also think that there is always a way of counter this kind of imagery, this kind of reading of space, this type of interpretation of space. Can we go to the next one? Here, I wanted to show you the image of here present Munara Bukhara, which I really like because you can recognize Bishkek here, right? And a lot of the construction works are going on nowadays in Bishkek. The city is so chaotic, it's crazy. And you see sometimes they do construction works and they would cover the monuments like this. And I love just like how easy artists just, counter that. They react to that and right away they change it and right away they appropriate the same gesture, that it becomes an artistic gesture. And thus the space is changed. And I really like this very little gestures, but it only takes imagination of artists so that this happens, right? But when I talk about production of space, I don't only consider urban interventions like this. There are also like very classical projects like exhibitions and some other things. Let's move to the next one. Going back to the theoretical framework, the notion of third space by Edward Sorge is also an important one. And Sorge was a follower of Henri Lefebvre, and he very much admired his work. And also in echo to his three-parted system, he developed his own three-part system, three spaces, three types of CNRS, like three types of space. So there is this first space as the space perceived, the second one as space conceived, and third space where these two spaces come together. Not only the space as perceived material, not only it as imagined in the construction projects, urbanist projects, but also the space that we live, that we appropriate, the space that we use by our everyday practices, the space that we produce by doing something that we do. Let's move to the next one. Another very important notion that I use in my research is that of the place identity, which was proposed by psychoanalysis, if I remember correctly, Poshansky in the late 70s. And what I find particularly interesting about this place identity is that you can actually, I could see this a lot in the interviews that I did with my the artists from different cities, and they would really enhance the identity, their city identity. And this is not only about like Bishkek identity versus Tashkent identity, so different cities, but also this can be clash in identity within one city. So I talked to some artists who said that they were the last generation of Frunze people. And nowadays we have Bishkek people. So it's super interesting. And this idea of place identity is based on this affective belonging, affective anchors that we have to a certain space, to the point that they are very important into shaping our identity, right? And I think it's interesting because not only it helps me to distinguish between different cities, and oftentimes people would tell me in the interviews that this is very Bishkek style, this is very Tashkent style in terms of art practices, but also it helps me to kind of do this generational, separation, because obviously I address the practices of artists of different generations. The first one, the pioneers, they were born in the 60s or even earlier 50s. There were even one artist born in the 40s. So obviously, generation-wise, it's a very different, very different social experience, very different experience of the city they lived in. And then you have younger artists who, as me, never had experience of living under Soviet Union, who had like the world open to them, who could travel. So this is a different type of identity, but these different artists can live in one place and identify and have connections, very different connections to that same city. Yeah. Another important thing that I wanted to mention is that unfortunately, art market often commodifies that place identity. There is even a saying, once I heard it, that people say, show me your art and I'll tell you where you're from, which means that there is, in terms of art market, I believe there is a kind of a expectation that non-Western artists would somehow make their identity appear through their art and their place identity. So they will somehow address the issues related to their own region, to their own culture, which is understandable, but also I think it's a very tricky moment. And there are artists for whom it's like a strategy of constructing this Central Asian identity. Especially this is valuable for artists who work as diaspora artists abroad. There are many of Central Asian artists who identify Central Asians, but who live and work outside. But also, yeah, just poses this question of how we present ourselves to through like on the market systems and other platforms. And the last notion that I use in my research is that of multi-locality, which was introduced by anthropologist Margaret Rodman. So there was this idea of multi-locality and multi-vocality, meaning that one place doesn't have one singular idea. So one place can actually be interpreted in diverse ways, in very complex ways, in very politicized ways. And one city can have different associations depending on who we're talking to, right? And this is very relatable for Central Asian cities, especially for Almaty and Bishkek, which we know historically emerged as colonial settlements, right? So Bishkek was Frunze before that it was Bishkek. Almaty was before Almata, before that in the imperial times it was Verni. So initially they were here as colonial centers, and then they emerged to be cities and capital cities, right? So when there are different types of relation because of that. And people living in one place would not have one singular identity, right? Connected to that space. So yeah, let's go to the next one. Yeah, for this idea of multi-locality, I wanted to show you this amazing series, which is done by Sanata, who's here, and her brother Marat Remkov. It's called Bishkek the Gothic. And I saw it here in June. It was exhibited in one of the museums. And what I think about it is that it really illustrates this idea of multi-locality in the sense that, okay, Bishkek is the capital, obviously, is the capital where some things happen. Like we can see the Alato Square in the middle of some political upheavals, right? I cannot say precisely what episode is represented here because it was not mentioned. It was just said that Bishkek in the time of tension. But I believe this must be one of the revolutions that took place on the Alato Square. And I love how the artists just inject these images with their own aesthetic, with their own universe. And I know that both of them are more or less interested in this Gothic creatures, Nosferatu, some other things. And so it's interesting how for them, the city becomes, the space that can be invaded by some creatures. So it's not only about power and political struggle, but it can be some other things. And many people can interpret the same space differently, right? Yeah, so just to sum up, the city in my research is considered at a specific level of social reality, and to be more precise, of artistic reality. And art, I consider art as activity that is informed socially and spatially, yeah? So how the question basically that I ask is how Bishkek, Almaty and Tashkent shape their respective art scenes, and how the artists residing in the city, they shape the cities in return. So it's like a process which is vice versa. Yeah. So the methodology that I use, as you could understand, it's pretty transdisciplinary, and I have a background in art history. I have background in contemporary art theory. So here for my research, I, of course, try to use all of these tools, right? Different art history, sociology of art, critical geography. So I do artwork and exhibition analysis. I do archival work, obviously. For contemporary art, it's pretty tricky because there is no state archive of contemporary art, but there are some private archives. So artists would have the archive of their own work, or in some cases, people would have centralized archive of different artworks, which is very helpful, actually very helpful for researchers like me, because in the official archives, you cannot find almost nothing about contemporary art. Sociology of art, of course, field research, ethnography, interviews, and then critical geography, like on-site observation, mapping. I also want to try out some walking interviews. For now, I still didn't manage to do it, but it's something I'm looking forward to do. So it's like a very social spatial approach with focus on artistic agency. Yeah, and I think I wanted to finish my presentation with one of the cases which really struck me, and I write about it in the working paper. So it's one of the projects that I saw here in June in Bishkek, and if you are from Bishkek, probably you saw it too. It's a solo show by Rakhat Asangulova-Kyzy, who's a local artist, and it's called Ittey Bishkek. So I try to explain now. There's a long story behind it. So Rakhat Asangulova-Kyzy, she studied in Moscow, I believe, and she studied journalism. And for many years, she used to work as a journalist for one media outlet, very big media outlet. 10 years ago, she told me during the interview, she came back to Bishkek after her studies, and she wanted to do some change for the country, in the profession, in the journalism. She arrived, and I think she encountered some kind of deception. Things were not happening as she imagined they would happen. So in order to help overcome the frustration she has, she starts walking through Bishkek and do the thing that we would call flaneur, like walking, wandering around. And she would take pictures, and she would walk through all the parts of Bishkek for 10 years. She collected a very colossal amount of images. And this year she decided to present it all as an exhibition, because for now she identifies as an artist working with text primarily. And so I managed to visit this exhibition. The title itself is very interesting. Ittey, for the Kyrgyz speakers here, so Ittey is a very interesting word. It means dog, and Ittey means dog-like. But it is used from what she told me, as a word which can actually emphasize the meaning of the following word. So we can say Ittey sulu, meaning so beautiful, extremely beautiful. You can say Ittey suluk, and this would mean super cold, extra cold. So it's emphasizer, the word emphasizer. So she called her exhibition Ittey Bishkek, meaning this is the Bishkekist Bishkek, in a way, right? But the word is rather, I would say it's not used, it's not how do I put it? So this is not, как сказать, такая лексика неофициальная, да? Да, вот как это сказать? Informal? Informal, thank you. Informal. So it's not very informal as a word. You would not see it in great literature. So she decided to crowdfund on her own for this project. She never got any institutional support. So she rented the underground space of the Frunze House Museum that you have here in the center of Bishkek. And the reason she told me, when I asked why this space, she said, well, there are many reasons, but one of them is that it was accessible, because she talked to the museum workers, and they told her that they initially wanted to use the space later, so they wanted to try out with her project, so they let her in. And so there was a huge underground space, and she arranged it in such a way that there were different zones in terms of color, because these are all different rooms. But when you see red light, this is just red filter that's put on the lights. There was video, and there was, of course, the photos that she has taken when she was walking through Bishkek. And yeah, of course, this is the type of art that has a lot to do with language. And if you're not a fluent Russian, Kyrgyz language, maybe it would be difficult to understand. But there's a lot of humor in that idea, that she presented the results of wandering around, and she would herself, her cardboard head would welcome the visitors when they enter. Can we go to the next one? And there were really huge spaces, you should go downstairs, you could go in different tunnels, and there were words and music. This is Rakhat Asangulova-Kyzy herself. And everything started in a very positive way until the moment, can we go to the next one? Where this is the underground, the entrance to the underground where the exhibition took place. And Frunze Museum is just here, you see. this Frunze Museum. And the underground is just next to it. It's kind of connected through the underground, but it just located on the side. So she put the banner with the name of her exhibition and her face on this wall, which is like the frontal wall located in the city center. And then the police employees, I think, they came and they asked her to take it off because they said that the words like this, like Ittey, is not the word to be presented in the city center. And so they really wanted to censor the exhibition, so she asked her to take it off. They then went inside the exhibition, they censored some parts of the show also, they covered some words, they covered some pictures. And actually what she tried to say me is that nowadays the center of Bishkek, the historical center of Bishkek, is so policed, you cannot put anything like alternative in there. And any attempt to kind of question the Bishkek, right, and put a word like Ittey would be considered as offense. And so they really got offended by the fact that she dared to put the banner, and also the banner with her smiling face. But also there was this idea of walking the mountains, like all the cliches of Bishkek. So the mountains, there was like poppy flowers, there was eagle flying. But also what I liked about this project is that the reason why she decided to go to the underground is because she wanted to question the formation of the institution, which is Frunze Museum. So Frunze Museum, for many, and for those of you who have been inside, you know that there is believed to be Frunze House right inside the museum. So if you go in the museum, in the building, you'll see that there is another building inside, and this building is believed to be the house in which the Frunze himself was born, right? And Frunze, you know that for a long time, the city of Bishkek was called Frunze. And for her to go there and to go in the underground of that institution and put her Ittey Bishkek, her version of Bishkek, her appropriation of the city, was a way of kind of counter this history, and was a way of kind of questioning, like, is it really the beginning of the city, or can we propose something else? Is there a space for us to interpret it differently? And it was interesting because it was, for me, about Bishkek, but also about Rakhat, about Rakhat very much. And this is the perfect example of lived space, because she considered the space of the city as the continuation of her own life, of her own challenges, of her own problems. So it was a very psychogeographical portrait of her and not of the city eventually. So I think it's one of the key examples which shows how this type of spatial, space-related issues can be articulated, can be questioned, can be challenged through art projects, and how these art projects then can open space for discussion, for contestation, right? And I think this is really needed in Central Asia to have this space, because there is not a lot of space for discussion, precisely for dialogue. So I am very thankful for artists that they do this, and that with their projects they open up this space for discussion. Can we go to the next one? So that was all for me for today. Thank you very much, and I hope we can discuss now.
Thank you so much, Dilda. It was really fascinating and also very clear. This case studies IBM. Very appreciated your presentation. I'm pretty sure that there are questions, so I open up to the floor. Yes.
Thank you, Dilda, so much for the presentation of your research in progress. I had just a small question regarding the last exhibition that we were talking about, Ittey Bishkek. I unfortunately didn't have a chance to go to the exhibition myself, but so was it in fact closed down because it got censored, or did she just close it as was planned?
Yeah, so I didn't explain this correctly, so thank you for this question. So the police and Gapar employees came and they wanted her to close it. But then, because of the media attention, so several media wrote about it, many artists came, and this really provoked a boom because she had a lot of attention. Citizens would come on a daily basis. And I think because of that attention, they decided not to close it. So she eventually closed it as she initially planned to close it on the same day, but it got censored. So the Ittey Bishkek banner disappeared. Some artworks were covered, and there were a lot of words. It's a textual exhibition, and many of the words were covered because they thought that it was not good for people to see these words. So yeah, so eventually they didn't close it, but they censored, and they provoked a lot of stress. But also, in a way, I think it helped the project to get to another type of visibility, right? Because this is how it works. They always come, but then in the end, it just reached some other audiences because it was written about, and some other people came, and so on.
If you don't mind, I'd like to ask another question. So, even though the exhibition didn't get closed down due to the censorship, like it did provoke a lot of debate, I guess, in the society about this in Bishkek. So to say that the topics that provoked the censorship in Bishkek with the local authorities rings a bell with the other places that we're talking about in Almaty and in Tashkent. Is it the same, like the topic that enrages the authorities?
I think yes, in a way. I wouldn't say that we have the very same things going on in Almaty or in Tashkent now. But I think that at some point of time, maybe a couple of years ago, we had the same issues. But this is what shows, what illustrates the interest of the spatial approach, is that space is considered as the medium of power only, of the state power. And so whenever someone intervenes in that, in this space and questions this power, they try to also to censor, to close down, to shut down, because they consider city is there, right? It's theirs. And they consider city as the screens and the platforms for their messages only. But when we propose some other messages, then this becomes tense. But we, of course, have not maybe very like identical, but some similar problems, right? Because they were basically concerned with the fact that the word Ittey is used next to the word Bishkek. So Bishkek is as the capital, very clean, very beautiful, flowering now, cannot be associated with something like Ittey.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
Yes, first of all, thank you for the invitation.
Please introduce yourself.
Oh, yeah. My name is Rahman. I'm not representing anything.
Nice to meet you.
Just my personal field of interest, yeah. We attended few of different meetings with local artists. BC had their anniversary last week, a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And they shared their like notes about this unique kind of formation in Kyrgyzstan, basically, which is different from Almaty and Tashkent experience. That because Bishkek never had like a official space, official like authority to support contemporary art. Usually artists, they create a groups. They never, no, not never. They usually don't act by their own, like personally. And if you try to name like famous artists, they basically have a group. Like you say artists, you see, and the worry was about that because of this group formation, because everybody friends. Kyrgyzstan have like a problem with inner critic of art critic. Yeah, what do you think about this?
Thank you, Evan, for this question. I don't agree. I think that we have the way art scenes are organized in Bishkek, in Tashkent, in Almaty, it's very similar. Very similar. Everyone has their own communities, own circles, own friends, and it's very natural for people to only be with people they like, right? And of course, it's important to work as a community in the context which is ours, which means there's no infrastructure for contemporary art, there is no platform, there is no support, there is no education system. Of course, it's more relevant to stay together, right? But I think criticism, lacking criticism, comes from the fact that I believe, actually, personally, that the bigger frame in which we all live, we appropriate. I mean, we interiorize it. so we live in a context in which not only the art world, but if we consider like broadly Central Asia, we are not used to discussing things and we're not used to criticizing things openly, you know. So of course we cannot expect that criticism to be born in the art world. We should make efforts so that this happens, but I think it's not related to that. This can be one of the factors because people don't want to hurt each other, right? But we as just general, as community, I think we cannot stand criticism, all of us, because we don't have this culture of criticism. But we can raise it, right? We can create it. We can be the generation that can stand criticism, that should stand criticism, because this is how it will eventually emerge, right? We need criticism. So yeah. And I know it was an answer for you. Sorry.
Thank you very much for the organization. It was so important and interesting. So I'm very happy that we can share. So my name is Alicia. I have just a question about circulation of artists within Central Asia and maybe to other contexts. Do you look at this international, regional and international circulation?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much, Lucia, for this question. I actually didn't, your question made me think that I didn't say one important thing is that, but I think you'll understand that contemporary art as a system was brought to us by the intermediary of Soviet Union, right? So as this part of this broader modernist project, this was brought to us through Soviet Union. And of course, the very first circulations would be through Soviet Union again. So there was a lot for the first generation of artists, the pioneers, they would all go, almost everyone would go to Leningrad, to Moscow. In Kyrgyzstan, by the way, there was a specific connection with the Baltic countries. So there was Narva, a festival in Narva, and some Kyrgyz artists, Gulnara Kosmodimova, they would go and participate in these festivals. They would study in the Baltic countries, but it's only valuable for Kyrgyzstan. It's very interesting. For Kazakhstan and Tashkent, it was mostly Leningrad, Moscow, and nowadays, because there is no Soviet Union anymore, and there are more opportunities, and there, I believe, is like bigger interest and bigger attention going towards the art of Central Asia. There are many different opportunities that emerge, and people go mostly still to the West, to the Western countries, right? Because we also have some governmental projects that support youth mobilities, student mobilities, and people would still prefer to go to the UK, to the US, for these studies. And this would be the main reason of their travel is studies. But it's still very much in that direction. Very small amount. There are some go, but very, very small, who go to China. So in the other direction. But I would say the majority still goes to Western countries. And also now there is more and more of artistic residences. So it's like when one artist can travel for like 2 or 3 months and then come back. And these are also mostly famous in Europe for now, in Western Europe. But we'll see how it will unfold, because there is a lot of effort, especially from Uzbekistan now, to come closer to the Persian Gulf countries, so Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. There is a lot of now interaction. So I believe maybe in the future we'll see some other trajectories. Yeah.
I always have my own questions. Yeah. So one is, I think, would strike any Westerners is the change of name for a city. And when you come from Paris, imagine we change the name from Paris to something else, to Macron City. I don't know. Anyway, so what do you think about that in terms of identity? I think it's very deep and it's super interesting. And also, I guess you've heard of the change of the name of Jalalabad recently and the reaction of the people. What do you think of it?
Absolutely. I wanted to mention that. Thank you for this question. I wanted to say that because this is something we went through already. So Astana was Nur Sultan, and then again Astana, you know it. And it's horrible. I mean, it's horrible. And I know many people who left Astana for this precise reason, because they didn't want to say that they come from. And this is horrible. So it's so violent because again, no one discusses this. We're just being pushed down this decision. Everyone is against, and still we have to name ourselves as Nursultanians, I don't know, Manas. Of course, it is addressed artistically by artists, but there's a kind of violence to which I think there's still there are ways of countering it, but it's just so big. I mean, when you rename the whole city, how can you counter it? Because you have to, like, this is so huge, and for individual artists to do that, there must be a lot of effort to be done. So I think it's interesting because it shows how basically cities are perceived here, right? So it's like a project, and each new regime would have a different agenda and a different name for that project, and so a different name for a city. But I think as artists as actors, they are capable of showing that, well, cities do not belong to the state power. Cities do not belong to the regime. They are ours, right? They are here, and we make them. We create them. So that's why this type of work that they do is super important. This is to show that we do not agree, and there is like this disagreement. Although it's very hard to see it when you look from afar. I think when you look from some Western countries on Central Asia, you really think that there is no agency, local agency, but there is one.
There is.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I may, I have another kind of question / remarks regarding your.
Дилда, у вас есть другие лекции об искусстве Центральной Азии? Может быть, размещено онлайн?
Нет, онлайн нет, ничего, к сожалению.
So it's about the concepts you use, and I was thinking, because I'm coming from medieval times, okay, so, but we're still very much interested in city. So we work a lot with some historians who are interested in public space and how it has been defined, especially in medieval times, where it's still super open and also very creative. And in Collège de France, you might have heard of Patrick Boucheron. He's specialized on Siena and Italian cities, but he also worked a lot with Habermas and philosophers who define city spaces, and who also, exactly the way you presented it, through this artist walk in the city to feel it, like physically, and to define it and to understand it. So I was wondering if this is something you might use in your PhD.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking a lot about this. So when you read anthropologists writing about the city space, they all do walking interviews, and they are so beneficial compared to the stable ones when you sit, right? And so I want to try it out. I wanted to try it earlier, but I just noticed that you cannot walk with the person who doesn't know you. And for some artists, they know me, but for some other artists, they never, like, they see me for the first time. So it's really hard to walk right away with a person you don't know. So I believe I have to establish a certain contact and this relation of trust first. And then we can walk together and they can show me, because my question would be to show me the places that are important for you, right? The significance of specific significance for you as the citizen. And I think this can only be done when there is this kind of trust. But I want to try it out. Yeah, it's a very interesting method that will give maybe amazing results.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Appreciated your answers and presentation. Any other questions or more? Well, so oh, sorry, Dilda,
You just mentioned that among contemporary artists, there are artists of different generations. But can you tell us, are there more young artists or middle generation, older generation? And also you mentioned that there is architect artist and there is journalist artist. How about others? Do they have some other professions? How do they finance their work? You said there is no help from state, Ministry of Culture does not help. So how
Yeah.
do they live? How do they promote their work? Where do they promote?
Absolutely.
And you mentioned 3 countries of Central Asia.
Yeah.
How about other countries?
Yeah.
Does it mean that there is no
No.
contemporary art, or just your choice or your possibilities are connected to 3?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for this question. So I work only on these 3 countries. So this is the delimitation of my research. Of course, as a researcher, you cannot work on the whole region. It's too huge. And this was my choice to work only on these 3. But this is not to say that there is no contemporary art in other countries. Of course, there's contemporary art in Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and if we consider broader Central Asia, like Afghanistan, Mongolia, of course, there is contemporary art. But I just don't work on this specific territories. Then for the question of how many artists there are, if there are more of younger generation, older generation artists, I think there's equal amount of younger generation and older generation artists, or maybe even more of younger artists, but they're much less visible, because when you look at who is getting presented, who's getting exhibited, who gets the resources, it would be mostly older artists, because they already have a certain experience established already. Absolutely. They have a reputation, they have a portfolio. So they have this weight, right, and capital, which younger artists don't have, obviously. Then artists, architects, artist journalists. So it's a very tough topic, because almost no one survives from their art in Central Asia. You just cannot. There can be like sales from time to time, but there is no constant sale which can afford you like a decent living. So they do many different jobs. They work as theater artists, they work as graphic designers, they work as illustrators, they work as some managers. They try to more or less work in the sphere of culture, but where their experience can be like handy, paid, and more, let's say, applied, right, to a specific demand. And there was another question, I believe. No.
I think nobody can add one more question.
Yeah.
Is there any prize in those countries? Is there any prize for contemporary art? And who supports it?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There is one art prize. It was established 2 years ago. And the death of one local artist kind of was the reason that this art prize was established. So it was an artist called Bahit Bubikanova. She was very young. She had cancer and she passed away in 2023. And after her passing away, the gallery that worked with her family, they decided to create a prize which would kind of perpetuate her memory. And they have like very small financial resources, but still there are resources. An exhibition that takes place every year in Almaty, in Aspan Gallery. Munara, who's here, participated. And Sonata also, both of them participated in this contest. So there's like a competition. Then there are some artists that are being selected by the jury. Then there is an exhibition. And after the end of the exhibition, they announce the winner. And the winner gets, there are 2 winners, I think. One whose work gets into collection of Aitiev Museum in Almaty, and the other one who gets financial amount of money, some support. But it's only here for 2 years, so it's too recent, too hard to measure the influence of it, and the amount is not that big. Actually, it's not that big to like make any substantial change in the living of artists, right?
But also where artists can show their work if museums do not accept the structures of state or cities, how do they show their work? Why do they?
So the situation is different from country to country. In Bishkek, unfortunately, there's no platform, but in Almaty we have now Almaty Museum of Art. So it's like a newly built museum of contemporary art. It opened only two weeks ago. And there they will be doing exhibition. Then there's one exhibition right now, several, one of the local artists, but they are planning to do more exhibitions of local artists. And then there is a Center of Contemporary Culture, Selini. They also do a lot of projects and they try to showcase local artists. There are some other cities, of course, not only Almaty, Atrau in the western part of Kazakhstan. There are some platforms. So there are like more and more platforms emerge, but still maybe. In Uzbekistan, the contemporary art is now being kind of taken by the state. So there is the state organization called Art and Culture Development Foundation. It's financed by the Uzbek government. And they are responsible for all the image projects that you have now in Uzbekistan and outside of Uzbekistan. So you have seen this exhibition at the Louvre for sure. In Venice, Venice Biennale, it's them doing it. And they are now opened Center of Contemporary Art in Tashkent, Bukhara in Bukhara, but they bring a lot of international artists also. So there is not like only focus on local artists, but they try to bring Westerners and kind of show the two. So it's not, the possibilities are not huge for locals, unfortunately. In Kyrgyzstan, there are museums, there are private museums, but it's also, as for a private institution, there is like no, I think, clear understanding of the format. And when there is a private person behind the institution, there's always the taste of this person and some other, aspects that go into power. So yeah, in Bishkek, unfortunately, there's not a lot of platforms to showcase this type of art, but hopefully there'll be more soon. Yeah, it really depends on the funding, and that's the only thing. So the funding is needed.
Please repeat the name of this prize in Almaty.
Yeah, Bakhit Bubikanova Art Prize. So Bakhit is her name, Bubikanova her last name.
Did her parents started that prize?
No, her parents could not afford it, but they were kind of here to support the idea of this prize. But I think the money comes from one company which has also, well, I actually don't know precisely where the money comes from, but I know that there is one media step which writes about the prize, and they somehow are involved, and they have some kind of patrons that I think pay so that there is this prize. And then the gallery who provides the platform, the physical platform where the show takes place.
Thank you. I maybe, sorry. Last question. You mentioned artist residency in Western Europe or in West part of the world. Are there any artist residencies in Central Asia? It can be also start for a platform also for artists to share their art and their work.
That's a very nice question. There is one that is now done by Tashkent Center for Contemporary Art. So they do in residencies, and they're really active on social media. If you follow them, you'll see they post open calls quite often. So they propose to come for 1 month, for several months, and there's a lot of rotation actually. There is one residency here, but it's part of this private museum, which is called Tolon Museum of Modern Art. You have here in the Bishkek region, not in the city of Bishkek, but in Kuntul. It's like a village, not far from Bishkek, and it's a private museum. But the founder, I think himself chooses the artist he wants to invite. And I know that one Australian artist, he comes here for a residency in October. So he'll be here. Maybe you can write and visit. I think they will be open to present. Yeah.
I can just mention Aitiev Gaparova's. I mean, she's here and she organized an art residency last year, autumn. Nice. And we will also organize another one as here in November in Karakol.
Yes.
Yeah, I think you had a question.
I had a comment to make if it's okay. I feel like even though there's not a state-sponsored platform to fully exhibit the contemporary art of Kyrgyzstan, there's still movements from the sort of classic traditional museums, like the historical museum and the arts museum, that are trying to open themselves up to contemporary art. They are not doing that many of them just yet, but every once in a while you can see them popping up in the windows. So they have a specific like temporary exhibition hall on the first floor that is usually deserted, but every once in a while they try to make something right here. So at least there's one platform where they can do that.
Yeah, very important. Thank you for pointing it out. Absolutely, there is a movement towards each other, more or less successful, but there is always this movement. Partly because one of the members of Bishkek School of Contemporary Art, she now works at Gapar Museum, and she even told me that there were some discussions. So maybe one day Gapar Museum should have contemporary art department. Maybe one day this will happen, you know. But they also they host some contemporary art exhibitions. Like there is this first April exhibition, Первоапрельский конкурс, which is almost annual Первоапрельский конкурс here held here in Bishkek. And the last Первоапрельский конкурс was held at the Gapar Museum, precisely. So there's kind of interest.
Infiltration.
Yeah.
Things gonna change.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time now to meet our speaker, and please join me in thanking Dilda. That was, fantastic
Thank you.
presentation.
Thank you.